welcome everyone. It's nice to see a smattering of people, some new folks. In closed session, we approved the personnel summary unanimously. It's in the back of the room if anyone wants to take a look at it. We also discussed item 4E in closed session regarding a student expulsion case. Is there a motion on this item?
I move that student number 17-1802 be expelled from the Tamalpais Union High School District for the following. Unlawfully, Section 48-900C, unlawfully possessed, used, sold, or otherwise furnished, or been under the influence of any controlled substance listed in Chapter 2, commencing with Section 11053 of the Health and Safety Code, an alcoholic beverage or an intoxicant of any kind. And pursuant to the terms and conditions of the rehabilitation program established by the board during closed session, the order of expulsion will go into effect immediately for a period of 2 semesters. Students shall be referred to Marin's Community School for the remainder of the first semester and will be allowed to re-enroll at Redwood High School under a stipulated agreement for the second semester of the 2017-2018 school year. If the student should violate any of the terms and conditions of his rehabilitation plan, the order of suspended expulsion will be revoked and he will be expelled without a further hearing.
Thank you, Barbara. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Ms. Lundgren?
Aye.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye. Thank you. That is never fun to expel a student. Okay. Now we're on item 7, approval of the agenda, including time limits. I need a motion for this.
I move to approve the agenda, including time limits.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Barbara, okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Right. Okay, we are now on to a public hearing, so I'm going to close this meeting and recess into the public hearing for the Tammy Union initial proposal to Csea for 17-18 school year.
Good evening, President Anderson, Dr. Yoshihara, Board of Trustees, student trustees, and the public, limited as though they are. It is my pleasure to announce that in preparation for negotiations with our local Csea unit, we would like to sunshine the following articles. Article 6, Transfer and Promotions. Article 10, Salary and Allowances. Article 11, Health and Welfare Benefits. Appendix MM, that's an MOU regarding classified layoffs back in 2010. And then job descriptions. You'll notice, if you recall from CSEA's sunshining of their articles, that they are very, very similar in nature. We anticipate really positive work sessions and looking forward to getting back to the table. And we're fortunate that our relationships are such that I think it'll be a very, very productive session or series of sessions. So those are the articles that we'd like to bring forward to the table with your approval.
Okay, and this is an opportunity for the public, as the name implies, to comment on this. This is a public hearing. Would anyone like to make a comment? Nope, I see none. So unless there's further comments from the board, I don't see any. We are going to close this public hearing. Thank you. All right. Item 9 is public comment on the consent agenda. Do we have any public comment on anything listed under whatever number that is? 18. No public comment on the consent agenda. So item 10 is approval of the consent agenda. Does anyone want to take anything off the consent agenda tonight?
Item F.
Anything else? F is the field trip to Olympic National Park. Nothing else pulled off of the consent agenda. Okay, then we need a motion to approve the consent agenda, noting that item 18F will be discussed in trustee considerations. Did I say 18F will be in trustee trustee considerations? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Student trustee reports. Let's start with Jacob.
Okay, so right now we are gearing up for homecoming. We have just picked the homecoming theme, which will be the Tam High Time Machine. So we're going to have each grade act like a different decade. The seniors will be early 2000s, the juniors will be the 90s, the sophomores will be the 80s, and the freshmen will be the 70s. Also, this year for homecoming, we want to make it a more inclusive experience. So we are strongly encouraging students to not boo the freshmen and to not tear down other grades' spirit decorations in their halls, which had been an issue in past years. Additionally, we are planning our Powder Puff game, which is always fun. And we just had our club day. And our club day, we had a little under 50 clubs, so very many. Also, we're trying to make sure that the clubs are actually real and not just college bait this year. So we're implementing that each club will have to submit minutes and must have at least 10 members and must meet 8 times a semester. We're also trying to pair more of the social justice clubs, for example, the Black Student Union and the Peer Tutoring Club, with specific people in leadership so that these clubs can be more effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Violet, looks like you're grabbing the
I was
mic.
ready. Oh, yeah. All right. So last week we had a bomb threat emergency, and reviewing it, a lot of things went well, but also some things didn't go that well. And just today we implemented a new dismissal plan that should be more efficient, safe, and calm. We also had club day last week. We had lots of participation and involvement. We had a successful game day. Mr. Sondheim couldn't be here tonight because he's at the foundation fundraising kickoff event at Minnie of Marin. And one of our teachers, Allison Kate, has been selected as one of the 2 state finalists for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science. And we also learned that this year we have 6 times as many students who carpool to school as last year in our effort to reduce waste and improve our parking situation.
Great. Okay, Maddie's grabbing the mic. It's everyone's on their own over there.
So we also had our club day, and we are reinstating the Slam Poetry Club, which sort of dwindled out a couple years ago. So everyone in that club is very excited about it. They're thinking about even creating a slam poetry team to try to compete in some slams. The environmental program, CDISC, went on a field trip to work on team building and get the incoming juniors really excited about their program and helping the environment. The rock program will also go on a field trip tomorrow, which they'll be camping at Coast Camp for a few days. And then we also had our first Student Senate meeting. And Student Senate is really trying to establish a governing board for Drake and trying to really bring up policies and things that the students of Drake feel are important issues for them. We are splitting into different subcommittees in Student Senate to focus on things more specifically, like how our school, what our school's environmental impact is, and what different courses our school offers, and how our ASB elections are run. Last year's Student Senate got creative writing and AP Econ as courses, and we also made our elections a little more accessible to students so that They used to be online and not very publicized, but last year we made them in advisory and by paper, so every student knew about it. And we're hoping that this year we'll get a lot more done.
Thank you.
Well, right on. So we're getting ready for back to school night, which is Thursday. That should be fun. That's at 6. Our staff at San Andreas met with other Marin continuation schools, such as Marin Oaks and Madrone, which happened last Wednesday. There will be 3 more in this year, and they will also continue to meet with county community as well. In our peer resource class, we're still focusing and talking about what projects we're going to take on to give back to the community, because right now we're focusing a lot on altruism, which is doing everything for others and, focusing on others. So yeah, that's also a campus-wide movement. It's not just students, it's staff as well. Our science department will be going to the California Film Institute in October for the Tree exhibit, which is a multi-sensory virtual reality installation that people get to experience the opportunity to grow from a seed to a full-grown rainforest tree. Pretty cool. We're planning other field trips, such as the Buck Institute. We're planning to go to the College of Marin Organic Farm that they have. And we're also going to the Marin Theater Company's showing of Thomas and Sally, which is about Thomas Jefferson and his relation with his slave, Sally Hemings. And that's also what we're focusing in history.
Great. Yeah, Barbara has a question.
How are those field trips? Who's handling the transportation? Is that based on parents driving?
It's usually the teachers and students sometimes, but probably not. Probably the teachers driving.
Okay.
Thank you, students. And Nina couldn't be
Personal
here
meeting.
tonight, but we'll get her update next time. Okay, it is now time for adult trustee reports. Let's shake it up here too. Let's start with Leslie, who just got off a plane. She'll be short and sweet.
Blah, blah, blah. No, I'm not in that bad a shape. So it's true, I've been out of town the last 2 weeks since the last board meeting, but I want to thank Dr. Topie. You provided me a book about 6 months ago, and I'm Courageous Conversations, and I'm about halfway through, and I highly recommend it to whoever has not read it. It's one of those books I think I'll pick up from time to time, but I think it's going along very well, and it'll help with my better understanding of the challenges the district's facing when it comes to looking at opportunity and achievement gap. So thank you.
Barbara, you're next.
I don't have anything to report from past meetings. I do have we've got a lot coming up in between this meeting and the next one, particularly the 2-day workshop on Beyond Diversity that some of us will be attending. But I do want to point out to the students and to the public, October's our Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and Wellness is doing a lot of activities. Students are doing a lot of activities to promote awareness. Let's hope that the kind of attention that this community has paid, particularly in Southern Marin, to breast cancer awareness, we can apply to cancer, period, and do make the kinds of progress in terms of treatment and care that this county has really been able to make on behalf of breast cancer for all cancers, because they affect all of us and certainly affect this community, students and families. So I hope we can take the lead here as board to promote health and awareness.
Did you bring in these?
Yes, I did.
I want to thank you so much. Weirdly enough, the timing worked out. My mom's getting her last surgery this weekend, and so I just wanted to thank you. It means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah,
So thank you.
we send our support to you, and that's something that people need to be aware of. You don't realize the kind of support that's out there until you need it, and so many people in this room have been my support system, and I hope that students and family members, that we can understand how important that is and appreciate it. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck?
Well, JLAC was the day after the last board meeting, so it always seems to be the day after a board meeting. I'm always saying, well, I'm going to JLAC tomorrow, I have nothing to report. But the news is the old news, and CSBA has been keeping us updated, but the main things, David was there too. The main things are that the budget reserve, we're out of the woods on that. And the second one is, with the 8:30 school start, it's not dead, but it's asleep. It didn't make it through the legislature, but it will come back, probably next year. I went to the Drake. They had an avid parent and student night. It was an ice cream social, so we had ice cream sandwiches. I told the staff there, I'm not here for avid, I'm here for the food. But it was a really nice event. I think that, prior to that, quite a few of the parents really didn't know what avid was, and what they were doing in the class. The presentation by the three teachers I thought was excellent. Liz Seabury was there. She had been in an avid school before coming to Drake, so she's a big avid fan. She said she'd been trying to get it into the district for 5 years. But that was a nice night. And let's see, I went on a day hike with the team program, and I'm leaving tomorrow morning to go backpacking in the Sierra for 9 days with them. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. I must say, my wife, who said, I'm not going to sit at home and pine for you, went to Greece.
Oh.
Got a $719 fare to Athens, and she's gone to babysit. And the student trustee, first student trustee dinner is going to be on Monday, October 9th.
There's a food
Taking
theme
a
with
big
Chuck.
barbecue.
Yeah,
I think I'm seeing this, that you have a food theme, Chuck.
Yes.
Yes, but you work it off on all these hikes and stuff, so it's good. Michael?
Well, how can I match that? I don't think so. Barbara, thank you for bringing breast cancer awareness to our discussions. Violet, also thanks for letting us know about that. All the support to your mother. The number of people I know in the last year or two who've been through breast cancer is just astounding. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. I think really the only thing that's of note that's reportable is that I was able to attend back to school night at Redwood, which was on the 14th of October, and it was as usual September, right? Sorry. It was a great evening, very well attended by both staff and the parents, and I had a chance to sit in on several classrooms, and as I noticed at TAM, I'm very happy that staff goes out, teachers go out of their way to thank the foundation for the contributions that the foundation makes in support of our students, including in one of the classes I was in, which was a very sophisticated microscope that someday I'm going to go back to this class and see if I can get a lesson on how to operate it. It wasn't just like an electron microscope. It was a microscope that I think projects so that you can have one person manipulating, right, the slides and so forth, if people still use slides, and have it project so the class can see what's going on. It was really interesting, and you could see how important something like that would be for the pedagogy. So that was very good.
Okay, I also attended the Redwood Back to School Night. It's the first time that I went and didn't have to go to any classroom. So that was interesting, and I chose to go to the library and the wellness centers because I never get to do that on Back to School Night. and met our Redwood librarian, and she told us, Michael was there too, about a grant that she's hoping to get, which will open up the computer lab to all students before and after school. She doesn't know if she'll get it yet. The allocation committee hasn't met, but she had a great vision, I thought. And then the Wellness Center, I talked to both the Jennifer Kennybaum and all of the counselors were there. None of them had any students. Whenever I'm doing a site visit, the counselors are always busy, and so it was a treat, actually, to have all of them in a clump and talk to them. They're very excited about the year, and the Wellness Center looks different every time I visit, and they now have more privacy for the students, which I think is necessary, and the vibe there was just really good. So that was fun. And then last night I attended an event that was sponsored by the Marin County Office of Education at Dominican. It was a program about Ambassadors of Hope, which is spearheaded by this powerhouse woman, and she is an advocate for homeless youth. And I know that homeless youth is not, we're fortunate in the TAM district that we don't have as many homeless youth as other school districts do, but even one is too many, and we definitely have at least one in the district. And it was fascinating. I was there for 2 hours. Senator Mark McGuire was there. Our own Jessica Colvin was there on the panel. The panel was Mark McGuire, Jessica Colvin, and then 3 young people, 3 youth who have experienced homelessness in Marin County. And they were so brave and courageous telling their stories. It was an eye-opening experience. I have all sorts of stats and data, if any of you want to see it, about how prevalent homelessness is for people under the age of 24 in this very wealthy community of Marin County. And we all know that students cannot learn if they do not have a place to sleep. So it's happening right here, and I was inspired, really inspired by those students, and Jessica Colvin represented the district so well. She was on the panel because our district is leading the charge in trying to provide services for all of our students. And she was very well spoken. It was a proud moment for me as a TAM person. So that was fascinating, and I do have that information. Their website has a ton of information as well. Okay, on to the board president's report. I wanted to talk a little bit about the lockdown and evacuation a week ago on September 19th. I had a unique perspective. I was meeting with the superintendent. It was a standing meeting. We always meet a week before our Tuesday board meetings to go over the agenda. And so this had been on the calendar. I showed up at 7:30, and Dr. Yoshihara greeted me and said, so this might be an unusual meeting because we got a bomb threat on our anonymous tip line last night that we're just, they just listen to the messages in the morning, so I'm going to have to be ready. And so we got going. It was quiet for a little bit. We got through our agenda, which I'm hoping you'll all like, because we got distracted. And as the day unfolded, I became a fly on the wall as Dr. Yoshihara kept receiving phone calls from our own staff. You graciously put me on speakerphone, so I just listened to how decisions are made when something awful like this happens, and I was so impressed with Dr. Yoshihara, with our staff. I heard you, Tara. I heard Principal Sondheim. I heard Chief of Police Norton. I think I heard Wes's voice at some point. There are just so many players involved when something like this happens to try to do the right thing and respond in an appropriate way, in a safe way. And you know, the conversation was all about keeping the students safe and how do we do this in the safest way possible, and it was so impressive. I hope never to be in that situation again where I have to think about a bomb threat, and it certainly made us speed up our meeting. I got off on my bike before the lockdown happened, and it reinforced how important it is to have good relationships with our community, not just our neighbors, because everyone becomes involved when something like this happens, but especially our law enforcement partners. And those relationships don't happen overnight. And it made me feel like we were doing something well. The communication lines were very clear. It was very, there was no light talk, but it was very efficient, and I felt like we were in good hands. So kudos to everyone involved. I hope not to be a fly on the wall again like that, but it was a good lesson for me that, again, communication and collaboration, which we talk to our students about all the time. That's what you need to be successful in the world. I saw it happening, and it was really working. So that was good. Okay, on to you.
Thank you, President Anderson. As you heard, I did want to express my appreciation as well on Back to School Night on September 14th. Thanks always to our trustees in supporting our schools during these events. As you heard, and it's worth echoing again, one more Back to School Night, San Andreas, this Thursday, 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock. So we're always happy to have you there, board, if you can make it. Back on September 18th, Monday, district staff, along with staff from the College of Marin, visited what we call an early middle college program called Alameda Science and Technology Institute in the East Bay. Staff was able to meet with staff at the school as well as students. We were able to ask questions and tour the campus and college. We found this most informative as our district considers opportunities with the College of Marin in this space. We continue our research on this to see if we can meet the needs of our avid students, or at least a subset of them. On September 20th, district staff from Mill Valley, along with Supervisor Sears' office, met regarding the work at Tam High School as we continue to talk about the growth that's coming. Specifically, we talked about some early ideas as it relates to a parking lot space. I believe it's a 77-lot parking space. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's in that rate. 76-lot parking space on the campus to mitigate the placement of up to 8 new portables, as you know, has been talked about for the coming fall. We will also explore other options that support biking, walking, and carpooling. Lastly, we are looking at a nearby church, I believe it's on Sycamore, that could serve as additional parking for our high school students. So these are some options as we consider what continues to be a challenge for, as we certainly our students know, but certainly our staff as well at Tam High School. On September 21st, I attended a brief conference down in Burlingame where I got to hear from, I think Mr. Frenneman talked, Member Ford talked on this bill. We actually heard from the Senator Portantino. I believe this was SB 317 regarding the late start bill. He came and spoke to superintendents. This was certainly a tough audience, as most of the crowd were not supportive of this bill. The senators' resolve around doing what science has shown is beneficial for students, particularly middle and high school students, is commendable. As you heard, he did say that this bill will be coming back. He has just started his term, so he said he's got 7 more years to go, and this is a priority for him. He was very attentive to the questions and comments posed by superintendents. I myself specifically asked the senator for some type of adjustment in the school day or school year if schools are asked to push back the day to a later start time. Lastly, as a reminder, we have some people attending Marin Community United event is tomorrow night at the Terrapin Crossroads. And then our next board meeting will be in 2 weeks. I show on October 10th. So thank you.
Board communications.
Board communications. I will continue. Just a few communications for tonight. We have a letter from, as you heard, California Science Teachers Association dated September 21st regarding Miss Kate, apologies if I mispronounced that, teacher as a state finalist for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. Letter from myself dated August 25th regarding the amendments to the 2017 through 2020 LCAP. Email from Ms. Laura Effel, community member dated September 8th regarding comments on proposed contract with Whitehurst Mosher. Some of these do come in late within the time frame for which we can post, so therefore, even though they don't look timely, we do post it at the next board meeting. So that's all I have for communications.
Okay, any questions on the communications? I always try to do that. Sometimes we get memos. I don't think we're good to go tonight. Okay, now is the time for public comment for items not on the agenda. And I see that we already have 3 of these filled out, so thank you very much. 2 new faces tonight. And because we do have people who want to speak to us, I need to read this blurb. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether sometime less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. You will have 3 minutes, and Mr. Christensen up here will be helping you manage your time. And we'll flash cards. I think we've got them at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then stop. Yes. So when it's your turn, you will have 3 minutes, and please approach the podium if you'd like to talk to us. I have 3 people here who filled out cards. So I see Teresa and Susan. I don't know if you want to arm wrestle for whoever would like to come first. And if you could please tell us your full name, that would be helpful.
Yes, good evening, board members. My name is Teresa Heider, and I reside at 21 Fern Lane, and I need my glasses. I wanted to thank the board members also this evening for those of you who became involved and helped us to reach some resolution recently. For 3 long years, I have attempted, and as well as numerous other people in the community, to address issues with Cervantes Drake High School and the vice principal and the principal with no response whatsoever, unfortunately. But now we finally, with the board's help, have been able to get some things resolved. There have been a number of comments from the neighboring people saying that things such as if we didn't like noise, we shouldn't live next to a school and so forth. And I wanted to clarify for everyone that we certainly support Francis Drake High School. I went to that high school as well as all of my siblings, and we fully support the regular activity that does take place at Drake High School, and we're very thankful to be a part of that. However, what we would like to address and make sure is clear is the unscheduled after hours and illegal activity that takes place. The things that we have been dealing with is kids coming in the middle of the night, anywhere between 10 p.m. and 5 o'clock in the morning, screaming, running around the field, banging the school equipment on the aluminum bleachers, constructing ramps with hurdles and using the high jump pads and other equipment on the field to build bike ramps and using their bicycles in the middle of the night. Kids who have been under our bedroom windows drinking, smoking marijuana and cigarettes. Kids who have set off fireworks on numerous occasions and lit fires on the field, not intentionally, but as a result of the fireworks. We have also had starter pistols shot off in the middle of the night, cherry bombs as well that rattled all the windows in our home. We have had the sound booth broken into on numerous occasions, and the students have gone in and turned on the sound, all these things again at 2 or 3 a.m. Numerous times we have called the police. Many times it is not a priority, and we understand that. It's not an emergency. However, they do not come because they have other responsibilities. So many times we do address it, and then we sometimes go out onto the field ourselves and politely try to address this with the students. We believe there's absolutely not any reason whatsoever that anyone needs to be on that field after dark, as it is pitch black out there and dangerous for safety reasons as well as for the community. And we fully support all the action that is being taken, as well as the resolution that everyone in the community is available and welcome to use that field 10 hours a day. And I think that is very generous of Cervantes Drake High School, and I think we're responsible to protect that high school. and to be responsible citizens, to be responsible for our students, our children, to make sure they know the rules and they are following them, and I think someone needs to stand up and do that. So I thank you, Board, for those who are involved and have helped us with this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Nelson? Yeah. Could you, approach the microphone and...
My name is Susan Nelson. I've lived in San Anselmo for 50 years, the last 25 at Sir Francis Drake. And as we've stated, we are actually on the line with the football field. And I normally don't have any problem at all. I can address things with Drake, like earlier this year, well, even just a couple weeks ago, at 6:30 in the morning, there were 30 girls outside my bedroom window screaming and yelling, and they were getting ready for track. And I went over and talked to the coach, and I said, is there any reason why you can't, the field's pretty big. Why can't you start over there and do your warm-up and do all your stuff there? And they apologized, and they did call me back, and they said they'd sent out an email and ask everybody to please not start things before 7:30 in the morning, and if they did, to use the other part of the field, which is the kind of thing, although you don't mind noise, it's different when it's 6:30 in the morning. And as Teresa was saying, a lot of people seem to think that she and I are just troublemakers, but I want to say that when you go to bed every night and you don't know whether you're going to ever have a peaceful night's sleep, it's very distressful. And I have gotten up in my nightgown and gone to the field many times, and I don't usually have trouble with the kids. They're very polite. They'll say, oh, we didn't realize we were making noise, and I try and let them know that they are not supposed to be on the field in the dark. Some of them are nice, some of them aren't, and sometimes you get called names and sworn at. Having to call the police, which he already said. I really didn't look forward to the reconstruction on the field this summer, because I thought, oh my God, more noise. But I have to tell you, it was the 6 weeks of the most peace I've had in a long time. No kids, no soccer players all day long and all night long, and it was wonderful. And I really thank you for your support and the new regulations. I mean, they're not all new, but some of them are new. And it's just that the enforcement has not been there. Nobody dragged their feet on, didn't want to take responsibility. And I think the school has to take the responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have Mrs. Crisanti. Did I say your name correctly this time?
I'd like to commend you for recognizing Breast Cancer
Can you
Awareness Month.
speak closer to the mic,
Of course.
please?
I'd like to commend you for recognizing Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and as a former emergency room worker, I'd also like to remind you, especially for those interested in the Social Justice Club, that there are 20 million uninsured Americans, and the experience of going through that without insurance is quite fraught without insurance. So I think that should be something that we think about. There's people of color are a much larger percentage of that 28 million, and so we live in a very wealthy community. It's maybe a good idea to bear in mind that not everybody goes through that experience in the same way. In fact, many of the people serving you coffee and bringing you drinks are uninsured, and even some hospital workers are uninsured. So just a moment to recognize them and their struggle, which is quite different. I made a request. I guess I should open the California Law Code that I think is relevant here is 38134D, which permits the district to rent the pool to, quote, a recreational youth sports league that charges participants no more than a nominal fee. As used in the subparagraph, nominal fee means an average of no more than $60 per month. I had requested information from you on August 12th, and what I had asked for was all records regarding entry fees for access to the pool at Tam High from 1950 to the present. What I got was 700 pages of receipts going no further back than 2010. I had asked for receipts, accounting logs, names of any nonprofits, and I didn't get any entry fees. So what I did get was, which was illuminating, deeply illuminating, was the fee that Strawberry Seals and Soma Aquatics are being charged. $50 an hour to $58 an hour for half of the Tam High pool, which is 8 lanes, which is a premier facility. $75 an hour for the entire facility. Now, Thank you. I want to point out how much these groups are charging. It is $400 a season to swim with the Strawberry Seals. They have 300 children. Quick back of the envelope
Excuse me, how many
math.
children? I didn't hear that.
300 children. That's a $480,000 grossing swim team, and they are being charged a very nominal fee by the district. The Soma Aquatics is charging $295 a month for a 4-day summer swim camp. That's $73 and change per day. $60 per child per day is what the state mandates. How are we fixing this? And should these teams, should Soma Aquatics and should Strawberry Seals be permitted to continue to rent a state-funded facility when they are not only racially discriminating, but they're economically discriminating? And by the way, I've spoken to quite a few mothers who had to pull their kids out, thank you, of Strawberry Seals because there's an additional $700 fee if you, as a working mother, can't meet all of the volunteer hours.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Sorry?
Thank you for your time. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Is there any other public comment? All right. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your comments. We're on to trustee considerations, and first up, we have our standing report on goals with Dr. Topier.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm just going to do an update on professional learning. This past Thursday, on September 21st, we had our first district department-led professional learning day. The teacher leaders for each department planned and facilitated the day for their departments, with the goal of narrowing the achievement gap central to the planning of those days. So what I want to give you is a sampling of what each of the departments did. This is not exhaustive, as they met for 8 hours. But briefly, the PE department brainstormed ways to help students be more successful and tried to identify potential barriers they may inadvertently be upholding, such as the uniform policy. They also learned various technology tools that can help them streamline the learning process for themselves and their students and make content more accessible. The math department discussed the Compass tool from Courageous Conversations as a means of engaging in difficult conversations amongst themselves and with their students. And they also discussed the impact high levels of stress have on students' ability to learn, and shared some strategies for helping students feel less stressed and therefore more available to learn. They also had a guest speaker, Lori Boswell, who is the author of their newly adopted Common Core Aligned Algebra 1 textbook, and she focused on a high-impact instructional strategy of teacher clarity and success criteria. The English department worked with the Bay Area Writers Project on applying an equity lens to the work that they already do. Social studies began the process of unpacking the new Next Generation History Social Science framework. A big part of that framework is engaging in culturally responsive practices. The framework actually calls it out. And in the afternoon, the Social Studies Department went down to Sausalito and learned about the history of the Marin shipyards at the Marin Ship exhibit. Science was joined by applied technology as they explored the role of engineering practices in the new Next Generation Science standards and discussed ways that the two departments can collaborate and make the curriculum more accessible and potentially across multiple departments. World Languages explored unconscious bias and how it can impact the way that we teach. Counseling also explored some issues of race and equity, and they further discussed the existing counseling leadership job in order to provide feedback to the TL subcommittee that's currently working. Special ed explored skills required for having difficult conversations, and fine and performing arts discussed grading practices and the impact they can have on student learning. So that's just sort of a sampling of what was going on across the day. Overall, the feedback from the day was very positive. There's lots of productive energy and good work occurring across all the departments. It was an exciting day. I just wanted to also remind the board that this Thursday night at Martin Luther King Academy in Marin City, there is a Race Matters panel. That starts at 6 p.m. also, and our TAM principal, J.C. Farr, is one of the panelists.
That's this Thursday. It's the same night as the San Andreas Open House?
It's the same
Or
night as-
back to school night?
Yes. This is part of the larger Race Matters that's going on across Marin. This is the education workshop and panel.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Topier?
Yes, I do. Tara, is there any discussion about common assessments?
Yes. Short answer is yes. A lot of what the work in the afternoon, I can speak to the math department. I was with the math department, but it is happening across all departments. But they are going through all of their courses unit by unit for clarity of outcome for each unit, as well as depth of learning in each unit, and talking about ways of having common assessments or cornerstone assessments within departments that we could use as benchmarks of progress.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Is that district-wide or site?
It's district-wide.
Site-specific?
It's district-wide.
Okay.
I have two short questions. You mentioned the uniform policy being a barrier. Can you expand on that? I think for PE.
So students being marked down for not being dressed for PE.
Okay.
And there's some research that has indicated that that has a impact on particularly low socioeconomic status students who may not have multiple sets of clothing or can't afford a uniform, or and there can be lots of reasons why a student isn't prepared to dress, and that it shouldn't, and looking at ways of not counting that against the student.
And then my follow-up question is, are you planning on repeating this type of exercise again, or is this going to be more of an annual?
So we have 3 district department days a year that are led by the teacher leaders. Our next one is coming up very quickly. It is October 9th. And that's also a district department day. And then March. I don't know the date in March, but some Monday in March, there is a district department day.
And so
also.
will the equity lens be part of all of these? They'll be intertwined?
It is.
Okay, good.
It's a theme.
Okay,
And, again, that focus of narrowing the achievement gap.
Okay, good.
Is
Thank
what
you.
we're focusing on.
Would you welcome interlopers?
Of
like
course, you're always welcome.
Motley Crue up here?
Yes, you're always welcome. They always meet here. We're scattered across these campuses between here and San Andreas because it's central. So, and we're happy to send out location times ahead of time.
That would be nice. I don't know if any of us can make it, but it's always nice to be invited. Any other questions?
Would you please follow up and send out that, like the schedule?
Yes.
That would be good, please. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Topier. Appreciate that.
It's on Columbus Day.
Indigenous people.
But for you can't celebrate Columbus Day, so
Indigenous people.
you're not allowed to come with your
Indigenous-
People's Republic of Berkeley shirt.
Indigenous Peoples' Day, please.
We ready?
Yes, we're ready. I think we're ready. Yes.
That is a common day off for the entire county. Superintendent's worked very hard to make sure we could have that day off countywide in case there was a desire to collaborate across the districts. So I think also it's a day that a number of other agencies have off, so we thought it'd make it a little bit easier for people with younger children in our feeder schools. So on to this next item here. I'm just bringing this here today for discussion. This came across my desk. It probably comes every year, although I apologize, I don't recall seeing it in the past. It's a solicitation for a student board member at the state level. And if the students here got to read this, they'll realize that they don't exactly qualify, but we would be happy to solicit input that you may have as it relates to ideas of how we can maybe find a student for this. The big reason is that you must be a current junior, because this is serving at the state level in your senior year. So as you can imagine, there's quite a bit of lead time that needs to take place. And one of the commitments is an attendance at a conference coming up this November for the selected student. Down south, I was in a district, one of my districts, where we did have a student trustee to be a part of this. I don't remember how many they have, but it's certainly, like all of you here tonight, certainly an honor to serve like here tonight, there is no remunerations for this, so you don't get paid, but certainly your service is welcome. So I don't know if you have ideas. I've reached out to your principals. A few of them suggested reaching out through the leadership as an avenue for an interested junior, but that's just one avenue to suggest. So you can either share with me tonight, or if you know of a junior, please forward that to our office, myself or Mary, and we'll be happy to reach out to them to see if there's, I think there's an application as well that must be filled out. So we'll be up for a discussion or comments on this particular item.
I'll just interject here. This is interesting. Dr. Yoshihara brought this to my attention, and we were debating whether or not to have this on the agenda, because we saw that none of you would qualify. You have to be a sitting junior right now, be a senior next year, but in an effort to bring student voice in more to the decision-making at the district level, we thought we'd put it on the agenda and hear from our student trustees, see if you had any more input. We knew the principals would have some input, but this is your chance to have a student voice on this topic. Or not.
I'll send out some texts to people who I think would be good, and then I just tell them to come to, where should I tell them to go?
Contact our office if they are interested.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is it one person per district or one person per high school?
It is, I think they will select a certain amount for the state level, if more than one. Does it say on here? It says 1 to 3 finalists will be selected.
For the state.
Yeah, for the state. So hypothetically, as many people can apply, because you have to apply and then the state will select. So we would welcome qualified applicants, and then the state has some method by which they will select. I think the governor, maybe with somebody else, selects the student. And there may be an alternate. Usually there's a primary and an alternate.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some students that would love to apply, that can. Yeah.
Let's go ahead.
Do you know more in detail what the conference entails? And what, like, do you know what things it covers, or how?
Yeah, it's a good question, Maddie. I'll tell you this. I'll see if I can find some info, and I'll forward it to the forward and the one who's from Temescal as well, and then you can pass that on for what that entails. I think tying into that, one of the things that they would certainly have to weigh is, and it says on here somewhere, the level of commitment. This is one of the things that did come up around all of you with all of your obligations to school. You are going to be missing a number of days to attend the statewide meetings. I think 1 per quarter. Is what it sounds like. So you just got to be aware that there is a time commitment as well by which you'll be traveling to Sacramento, whoever the student is. So they have to be aware that that'll be an expectation, sort of like your expectation to attend all of these. They'll just have to keep that in mind as well as a commitment. But I'll check on that conference to see what it covers and what it's about. I'll send that out too.
I'm looking at the attachment, Maddie, and it says current issues like Common Core, the implementation of the local control funding formula, and the achievement gap need the voice of an individual who is willing to serve as an advocate for the students of California. So those are 3 things they mentioned. It's pretty broad. So if Dr. Yoshihara could find anything else.
Yep. Will do.
Barbara.
Dr. Yoshihara, will you be point person then? Because I would imagine the students might have some questions during the application process. Who's going to help them with that application process?
Yes, I think our office will do our best to try to help them answer those questions and get this filled. There is a deadline coming up rather quickly, October 12th, so just have them keep that in mind too. So yeah, we can help them. Our office will facilitate.
And the district, will pick up pays.
Yes, either us and or through the state once they're selected. I believe the state covers the costs associated with them if they're selected.
Okay.
Any other questions on this from students or adults? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Yoshihara. I'm going to, Tara, before you get up, I forgot to do something in my board president's report, and I feel bad about that. We had a request for a moment of silence for a former TAM High School employee. She worked at TAM for 21 years, from 1965 to 86, as the school's registrar, and she was very well loved. Her name was Ellen Chang. She passed away on September 6th at the age of 91, and her son, who was a school board trustee at the age of 23, he was elected. He asked us to have a moment of silence for her. Her birthday, she would have been 92, I think, or her birthday was yesterday, would have been yesterday. So usually we have a moment of silence for someone who is on the payroll or recently retired, but this was a direct request from her son, so we are going to honor her memory and have a moment of silence. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I didn't get to that earlier. Thank you for leaving me a note and reminding me. Appreciate that. All right, now, Dr. Topier, you are up. This is 9th grade math placement.
Good evening again. So tonight I'm going to be presenting our 9th grade mathematics course placement data. As you can see, this is the requirement under Senate Bill 359. So tonight I'm going to review the bill, present you with the data, and then just share some information on what's occurring around the district to improve student outcomes in mathematics. So as a reminder, this was a bill that went into effect in January of 2016. Yeah. And there's multiple parts of the bill, but essentially it focused on appropriate math placement, particularly in the 9th grade level, as research around the state indicated that there were certain student groups that did not have the same level of access to high levels of math as their counterparts, which impacts the ability to apply and matriculate into particular UCs. So because of that, they set this law into place. The law requires that we test all incoming or assess all incoming 9th graders for appropriate placement, and that we reassess within 3 weeks, and that we have a transparent process for appealing any placement decision. Interestingly enough, the law does not allow you to use teacher recommendation for placement. We had the board policy that went into place in August of 2016. You can read it. I don't need to read you the board policy, but this is the process that we go through each year to administer the assessment and to get back to grade it and to place the students. So we work very closely with our feeder districts because the 8th grade teachers have to administer the assessment. And we worked collaboratively to create a communication that goes out to the parents every year, but then we get it back, and the math task force members are the ones who actually collaboratively grade this assessment so that it is normed among the group. So what we use to place students is the score on what we call our ELMA, or entry-level math assessment. We have developed this. This is not a standardized test in the sense that it was not created by a company. It was created by our math task force. We have gotten feedback from all of our feeders on it, and we continue to work with the feeder districts and tweak it for appropriateness. We also use the 8th grade math course that the students take. and then the grade earned in that. As I said, there's a verification process where within 3 weeks of the start of school, we have to reassess the students for appropriate placement. So this is where our 9th grader is placed. So the way this chart works is that for Algebra Foundations, 116 kids are taking that course across the district. And for each of our student groups, these are the percentages that are represented. Right? So if you go across, that's 100%. So quickly, some things that jump out from this, these data are that our African American students and our Latino students are overrepresented in our Algebra Foundations, which is our only below grade level class, and that our white students and our Asian students are underrepresented in that class. And then if you get up to advanced algebra, you know, we have, again, overrepresentation, about normal representation here, and then no representation here. Again, those are very small numbers that are taking advanced algebra. I'll talk a little bit more about shifts in placement due to Common Core. So these scores are how students scored on the ELMA, on the placement test, and where they landed in the courses.
Tara, could you help us with how to read this?
Sure. So what this is the average percentage score on the ELMA. So out of 100% on the test, these were the scores. So if for African American students who were placed in Algebra Foundation, their average score was 44%. For Asian students who were placed in Algebra Foundations, their average score was 29%. As opposed to, you know, Latino students placed in advanced algebra, they scored on average 100% on the ELMA. So it would make sense that we would see the scores go up as the classes increased in difficulty. So one of the things that we've been very careful with examining is making sure that these numbers are accurate and that we're not, you know, we don't have huge swings. I mean, we do have, you know, pretty big swings here, but that the scores should be relatively even across groups within each category. So this is the same data, again, looked at a little differently. So what this is you can see what percentage of each group landed in which class. So for our African American students, if you, all of these blue lines add up to 100. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we would expect this to be the case due to Common Core. Common Core has pushed algebra back into the 9th grade from the 8th grade. So we would expect that we would start to see most of the kids coming in to Algebra 1. And fewer kids coming into advanced algebra. So under Common Core, to come in as a 9th grader into advanced algebra, you are 2 years ahead in math.
And the difference between honors and regular geometry is what?
Well, they would, pacing and depth would be the big difference between, they cover the same content, it's just to what depth and how fast. So some analysis of our data, as we said earlier, there's an overrepresentation of African American and Latino students in Algebra Foundations. We have an underrepresentation of African American students in geometry, honors geometry, and then no representation in advanced algebra. Underrepresentation of white and Asian students in the lower level class. And with the change to Common Core, we see fewer 9th grade students entering into geometry and advanced algebra. And this is, I mention this because it remains a tension in that a lot of students want to try to get through calculus in high school as a perception of that in order to be competitive for college, you need calculus. So coming in at Algebra 1 means that you probably have to double up or do an acceleration to get through calculus in your 4 years. And that is an issue that the Math Task Force has been looking at, and looking at We're not really fond of a compression idea, which would be some schools are compressing geometry into Algebra 1. And it sort of turns into this like 3-semester course where you're basically doing Algebra 1 for a semester, then Algebra 1B and Geometry A for a semester, and then Advanced Algebra, A and Geometry B for a semester. You're doubling up, and you cover 3 classes in a 2-year period. We, in our district, the data does not show a whole lot of success with students doubling up as a whole. There are some students for whom it works well. We have some students who choose to take geometry online over the summer and finish it in the fall. So we're looking at some options for that. So one of the,
Sorry, can you go back to the prior slide?
This one?
Yeah, the one in the lower left corner, there's an underrepresentation of white and Asian students in Algebra Foundations. So what's the implication of that? I mean, I understand that it's sort of an observation when you look at the chart vis-a-vis, but the two on the top, we're talking about African Americans, we're talking about we'd like to be able to close the achievement gap, right? There's an implicit goal in that, but this kind of flips that on its head, right? Our goal is not to have more white and Asian students in Algebra Foundation. So how are we to take that?
So what that does is it points out that the nature of the gap. That it's not just that we have, more African Americans in the lower, it's that we also have fewer white and Asian students. So the gap is even wider in that, in that case.
Well, if the African American and Latino students are overrepresented, then by necessity, white and Asian students have to be underrepresented. It doesn't really need to be stated. It doesn't really need to be stated.
Well, and also they're not all groups were in there. It was specific groups, some groups are even, right, with their percentage of the population that they represent is represented in that group.
Okay, all right.
Yes, no, the intent is not to say we want more whites and Asians in Algebra Foundation.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of an odd way to express that. And so maybe, in the future, we can give some thought to, right, because just the way it's presented,
Well, I think another way to think about this is that we can assume that more of our white and Asian students are coming in prepared for Algebra 1. So it's a way of looking at, so mining for some practices that why are these students not needing Algebra Foundations than others are.
I think that's a more productive way of sort of phrasing it, if you will. I mean, to me, that makes sense, right? Then you're saying, okay, just like what you said, so what can we do to help lift up or help prepare, better prepare the students who are getting into Algebra Foundations?
Yeah, I think for me, it's important to call out who is and is not in certain areas.
Tara, Algebra Foundations, this year, 116 students were placed in Algebra Foundations. How many more is that from last year? Are there more in Algebra Foundations this year?
Actually, it's slightly less.
Slightly less, even though we have more ninth graders than we did last year.
And I think one thing that I'll point out, we had, improvement in moving African American students from Algebra Foundations into Algebra as ninth graders.
Okay.
So here are some of the hope and the spirit behind this law is that we will move students up. The idea is to ensure that students, have access to higher level math. So the idea is anyone being placed too low? So that's sort of the lens we use when we're looking at this data. So there were a number of students who were moved. The original recommendation was from Algebra Foundations, and they were moved to Algebra 1. We had a few appeals, but not. I know one that actually reached me, and that was actually for honors geometry and not Algebra Foundations. So the appeal process seems to be working. We don't have a lot of appeals to placement, as I said, because most students who are moved, their placement is moved up, not down. So some of the importance of math placement and, again, the spirit behind the law is, completion of college-ready mathematics is a primary gatekeeper for students matriculating into four-year colleges, being eligible to apply and then actually matriculating in. If you do not complete a college-ready math sequence, you're likely to have to remediate at least one level. As you can see here, that remediating even one level decreases your chances of persisting or earning either a transfer, an AA, or a certificate drop to less than 20%. If you have to remediate more than one level, it just becomes, highly, highly unlikely that that student will persist. So just for clarification, when you have to remediate at a college level, you don't get credits for that class. You are taking the class in order to get access into the college level class. So you can imagine that if you have to remediate 3 levels of math, you're taking 3 math classes, that's 3 semesters where you are not getting credit. You're just trying to get the skills to access the college level math. So it can be cost prohibitive for people and time prohibitive if it takes you 3 semesters just to access the credit bearing course.
And I asked you this, and you answered my question, but I wanted everyone else to hear it. I asked if we have access to remediation numbers for our TAM Union graduates. And you said that College of Marin. I'll let you say what you said.
Yeah, I do believe we can get that from College of Marin because we have a close relationship with them. It's not broad data that I have available to me. What we do have through the National Clearinghouse is persistent rates of our students. So of our students, who matriculate, how many of them finish in 6 years with a diploma?
But we don't have specific remediation.
I don't have that right now. That is something I can try to acquire from College of Marin. I know a few years ago they provided us some of that data.
I think that would be interesting to know how well prepared our students actually are if they do need to remediate.
Thank you.
Tara, that
Yeah.
third bullet point that you and Laura have been discussing, is that meant to include any course that needs to be remediated, or is it solely math?
I was looking specifically at math, but I would imagine that for it's similar for English. More students have to remediate math than they have to remediate English courses. The numbers are astonishing. I don't know if I have them, like close to 70% of students who enter into community college in 2015 needed to remediate either a math or an English course. But this data this is specific to, I was looking specifically at a math study, so I can't answer if that is just one level in math or not. So the question then is, what are we doing to improve mathematics success? As I mentioned earlier, the math department is working very hard on aligning content and rigor levels for all courses across the district, so that we know that students achieve better when they know what is being asked of them. What's the clarity? We have the math challenge group that it's in its 2nd year. This is a collaboration among Tam High, Willow Creek, and MLK. And the idea is that within 3 years, we will ensure that all students from Marin City, Sausalito enter 9th grade ready to be successful in Algebra 1, is the goal. This group meets every 6 weeks. It's a data-driven group. We have, luckily for us, both MLK and Willow Creek use something called the MAP assessment, which is an assessment that's given 3 times a year. And what we were able to do last year was look at previous student scores, students who were currently being successful at TAM in Algebra 1, and backtrack and look at where their scores were at various points in the 8th grade as well as the 7th grade, and calibrate and set some benchmarks for MAP scores, knowing that we can then target students for intervention earlier, so we're not waiting until the summer before they enter 9th grade to try to fill in some skill gaps. But if we can do that along the way throughout their junior high years, we believe more of them will come into the 9th grade ready.
Are is there a single subject credentialed math teacher at MLK
There is this year.
this year?
Mm-hmm.
So have we lost a year, though? Well, you said this was a 3-year project.
Right. So we had David Wetzel teaching 8th grade math last year down there. He is still collaborating with MLK.
Okay.
And one thing that was actually a happy coincidence for us was that MLK adopted the same textbook we did, unbeknownst to us, the big ideas. So Lori Boswell, who was here presenting to our math team on Thursday, is working very closely with MLK also. So we have that alignment in professional learning, which has been really helpful also. And that's what I had there.
Is there, you do point out MLK and Willow Creek, but we have, how many feeder schools, 12? Or
11?
I thought we had 12.
We might.
So have you, in looking at the data, pinpointed that these are the schools that the majority of the students that are not ready for algebra run?
These are, yeah, so in looking at who struggles the most in math in our district, it is students, particularly from MLK. For the reasons that Barbara mentioned, they've also been without a math teacher for the last couple of years, and we noticed, I guess it was 2 years ago, a group of students coming through that were particularly struggling. And so partnering with them and trying to get some partnership among Willow Creek and MLK has also been really helpful. Willow Creek has a math coach, they have resources. So this is something that we would love to grow, and work with all of our feeders. Because of the ELMA, as I said, that has been a nice tool for alignment, because that really gives our feeders exactly what we want students to know and be able to do in order to be successful in algebra. So we've been able to build off of that tool as a way of aligning. But we have not had this kind of formal collaboration among all of our districts. One thing we have started doing over the last 2 years is we provide them all of this data. So
good.
we've been, I work with Alina, and we have been giving all of our feeder districts not only this data, but at the end of the year, they ask for success. So they get their student placement data and then how successful. We can't give, we can give aggregate. We can't, because they're no longer their students, we can't give them student data, so to speak. But we can say, 80% of your students who entered into algebra were successful, things like that. So they have an idea of how their students are doing once they come into our system. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
With respect to the Common Core pushing algebra into the 9th grade, and you said that that could disadvantage some students. If this is done in public schools nationwide, then everybody's everyone's on the same boat. But that doesn't apply to Branson. It doesn't apply to Marin Academy. It doesn't apply to Marin Catholic. So are public school students going to be disadvantaged getting into math heavy programs in college?
Yeah, I can't answer that definitively. What was interesting when Common Core was coming out, a lot of math professors, led by some Berkeley professors, came out strongly against teaching students calculus in high school. Calculus is considered a college course. Their emphasis and their support of the Common Core was spend more time teaching them the fundamentals in high school, and we'll teach them calculus. So it's a culture shift, because I think the perception is definitely that if I don't have calculus, I'm less competitive. And I can't speak definitively to whether or not that is true. What we can say is competitive colleges look for the most rigorous course offering. Did you take that? So if your school offers, BC calculus, does that disadvantage you that you didn't take it? I don't know. I did not take calculus in high school. I'll just share that.
One of my students who took calculus AB at Drake and had an 800 on her SAT, so this is no math slouch, went into computer science at Cal and felt like she was behind in the introductory course because almost everybody else in that class had taken BC. So, it might be the math department at Cal is all for pushing this thing, but maybe they're not talking with the computer sciences people. So,
Yeah.
I'm worried
I
that
mean, it's-
private school students are going to be advantaged in this. The other observation I have is that I was in one of David Wetzel's foundation sections the week before finals last year, and there were 26 kids in that section, and he said there was the same number in his other section. When at the beginning of the year, when we were looking at all those numbers, there were 20 kids, and there was that agreement, among math teachers that they would put more you'd have a heavier load in the advanced classes and fewer students in the lower classes. But it's, his classes started at 20, but during the course of the year, they kept drifting in because they weren't making it in Algebra 1, 2. And he gave me a look at his grade book, and the grades were pretty heinous too. There were a lot of D's and F's. So, I'm wondering, what we can do to prevent having those load-numbered classes drift upwards during the year, number one. And number two, I'm curious if, David's experience at TAM was also mirrored at Redwood and Drake in terms of the classes, just kind of the numbers just sort of bubbling up.
Yeah, I was in Redwood's math department last week, and the foundation rooms I was in the numbers were still pretty small.
Well, it's only October.
Not even.
Not even. And I imagine that was the case at TAM last year, but it wasn't the case in June.
One last question. You mentioned that, the math department's looking into some strategies and they don't want to compress.
Yeah.
I know that we've discussed this in the past and we have budget concerns, but there was at one point I recall you commenting that if we were to ever have summer school again, it would be a very different beast.
Yeah.
That it'd be very focused on just the areas that a student needed. They wouldn't take the full course, and it would be a way of helping students catch up. Do you think it's worth us still looking at creative ways that we should consider summer school or other avenues that we could provide more opportunity to make up work? Or
we do sort of a math version of summer school down at TAM, and it is based on competency. So David Wetzel runs it. He gets his list of students. He gets a list from their teachers of topics that they need to develop their skills in. And so that's how he focuses. And the idea of that is instead of repeating a whole course,
right,
we work with this student in the spring and sometimes into the fall so that they can continue to advance along the math sequence. And what I don't know right now is how successful those students are being. Because for some of them, if you don't finish over the summer and then you're entering into another class in the fall.
Yeah, it's not going to help.
Yeah. And the math task force is also exploring online providers for alignment to our curriculum. Now that's a tough, it really needs to be a blended process and not just an online delivery. But we're, like I said, trying to look at creative ways that we can support students to be more successful without, we only have 4 years, so trying to figure out how they can be college ready in those 4 years is really what we're trying to look at, and look at multiple avenues for doing that.
My very limited experience teaching weak math students here in the district is that they were lacking really basic skills, the stuff that we learned in 5th and 6th grade. Multiplication, adding of fractions, basic arithmetic. And for many of the students I had, that was just totally lacking, and it just, what do? You just, where do you begin? You're trying to teach quadratics to someone who can't add a fraction, doesn't know that 150% of a given number is greater than that number. Very, very basic things, and and I found it to be common. So I think it's a very, very difficult challenge to get those students up to grade level when they are really, in some respects, 3 or 4 years below grade level.
And what's even more challenging is a lot of the research indicates that you can't just focus on those low skills, that conceptually students can often grasp a concept that is higher than the procedural skill they're able to do. So the challenge really is, how do you build those procedural skills, and not deny them access to the conceptual skills, because it's often the conceptual concept that when they do grasp it, things start to make sense for them.
It's kind of iterative.
Yeah, so it's how, remediation has often been just in those procedural, and I think that's where we lose kids, because it gets really repetitive, and sometimes they don't really understand the concept of why they're doing this. So that balance of, are we continuing to build conceptual knowledge while bringing up the procedural skills?
Yeah, I think this is really very sophisticated stuff.
Yeah, it's not easy, or we wouldn't have a math problem in the country.
I don't know if I have a curiosity. When we look at low SES, would it be useful to break down that by gender? I'm curious to see how how the genders break down in those areas, and wondering if girls might still have an advantage. And then that dovetails really into questions around the relationship of English language ability, because and according to the scores we're going to see, the ability to understand orally, because most math is, yes, it is visual, but somebody's telling you how to do it. And I think there are some, I suspect that there are some language issues that are bound up there at that level. And we used to see that, and we were able to mitigate that in summer school very directly, very direct intervention at those levels. And that was teacher-student specific. So we'll see. I'll be looking at that.
Okay.
Is Elma being given along with the honors level entry exams that the
They're
schools
two
used
separate
to?
exams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone takes Elma. Everyone's required to. The honors exam is a separate exam, and students who wish to take that can take that.
So does Elma not place people into honors?
It does not.
Okay. And then also, do you know why teacher recommendations are not taken into
I don't
consideration?
know what the reasoning. That's part of the bill, and I don't know. I can't speak, effectively to what was driving that. Other than I think what they were trying to do is get very objective measures.
I had a comment. It's anecdotal, but I think it's applies to a lot of other families in the district. My youngest just graduated, and she took calculus last year. She took the AP test, and she earned a high enough score that she passed out of the requirements to take any more math at the college that she's attending. And so I'm thinking about that, and Common Core is driving the curriculum that we now offer at the TAM district. But it's certainly nice for me as a parent and for my daughter that she can take classes, other classes that she's much more interested in. I think she got through calculus at Redwood. I wish Common Core had been up and running earlier, because I think, she she did it, she got through it, but I'm not sure she had those basic skills that you were referring to. But on the flip side, she passed out of the requirements for $89 the fee
Right.
to take the test. So I asked you if there was pushback about the, this, the math curriculum that we offer for those students that are on the calculus track.
Yeah.
And
There's still, because all of our feeders are still offering algebra, that the conversation might be happening more there. It's a conversation. We're not getting a lot. I'm not hearing a lot yet. We might start to hear more. And we're watching our numbers closely to see how they're shifting. What percentage of our students will continue to make it to calculus, and will we see a drop-off in that? This current junior class is the first class that had 8th grade Common Core math implemented. So I think in the next couple of years that might become a bigger conversation, as parents have students go through, and if that starts to become a bigger concern, if fewer and fewer students are meeting calculus in high school. So I think we're watching it closely.
yeah, I imagine that conversation will not go away.
No.
No.
Excuse me.
I have a quick question. Do you know how many, or like what percentage of students who started Algebra 1 go on to intermediate algebra versus advanced algebra?
I do not know the actual number. If I were to throw a dart in the dark, I would say less than 30%.
Oh, okay.
Most go on to advanced algebra.
Okay. Also, this is a comment. I took geometry online, and when I got to pre-calc, I did not have what I needed, the geometry background that's needed for that class. So if the district is going to do some online partnership, I feel like they'd have to make sure that it lines up with the curriculums that are in place in pre-calc.
Yeah, thank you. That's a comment.
Yeah.
It's a pretty common comment
Yeah.
that we hear.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Dr. Topier on this item? Thank you very much for this report. Appreciate it. All right, you can just stay right there. We're on to Casp, and can you spell out what that acronym stands for my benefit and
Yeah,
our student
I think
trustees?
I think I have it in here, don't I? California, it's the California Assessment of Student Progress and Proficiency. So I do want to preface this report with a little bit of a caveat, and that is that we got our initial results earlier in July, and then the state pulled all results because there were some students that were showing up in the wrong place, was the explanation we were given, that the data wasn't accurate entirely, so they then pulled all of the data, and they have just recently re-released it in embargoed fashion. So while I have our data, I am not able to present comparative data. In the last 2 years, I'd like to show you how our feeders are doing and comparative districts, but I'm not able to show that data tonight because it is still embargoed by the state, and there is not, as of now, a release date that they've given us. Well, the first release date was August 31st, so that's where we are with that. So just a few reminders of what the California Assessment of Student Progress and Proficiency is. That this is the new sort of accountability system. And just for clarification of what the terms mean, the Smarter Balanced Assessments are the assessments that the student take in the 11th grade. The Smarter Balanced Assessments come under the Casp system. And I apologize, I left this on. They stopped giving the California State Standard Test. They will no longer give the science test. They are now piloting the new Next Generation Science Standard Assessment. but we don't receive any data based on that assessment yet.
Excuse me, would that be the same grade levels?
We don't know yet. So last year, we were assigned grade levels. The different schools were assigned grade levels that they piloted the test in. And my last understanding is where they were going to land with that was that districts could decide whether or not students would take it in the 11th or 12th grade, depending on the course sequence they're choosing. So this past year, we had our third official administration. As I said, this current year's juniors will be the first group that we will have 8th grade SBAC data from after they assess. So in English and Language Arts, it's all 11th graders. The shift here from the former standards test to the Casp is instead of, in the former test, if you were in Algebra 1, that's the test you took. If you were in geometry, that's the test you took. This is an adaptive test. Everyone starts at the same place. The idea is to assess college readiness. So it's not based just on where you are, it's based on where a junior in high school should be to be on pace to be college ready in English and math. So students receive individual score reports. I won't go into detail in that unless you want me to, but they do get their scores. And we did mail out our individual student scores in July. Yeah.
Is there any opportunity for students and parents to see, get some context for what these tests might look like?
Yeah, they can go on. You can go online and you
Okay.
can take a sample test. You can log in as a.
Are parents informed that that's available?
We did a couple of informational nights. I don't know that we send out a letter every year with the websites and letting the parents know about the assessments. Yeah. So just to emphasize that this is just one measure, right? This is not be all end all, but it is one measure of how our students are doing, how we're doing with instruction and our practices in these particular skill areas. So here are our scores for ELA in math for the 2017, so the spring 2017 administration. These are just our straight scores. That we improved slightly in math overall as a district this year. So here are the comparative 3-year scores, which give you a little more context. So while we improved as a district over last year, we still haven't reached where we were in year 1. The other thing I want to point out is with San Andreas and Tamalpais, they have very small numbers of students taking the test. So, their scores, their percentage scores can shift wildly because of that.
Tara, when were the teachers given this information? I know I asked about the Drake ELA drop from last year to this year, and you said they're still unpacking, they're just beginning to unpack them.
And because they re-embargoed the data, it's been hard to drill down.
Mm-hmm.
So the teacher leaders and the administrative teams were given this data in August. And these sites are sharing all of this data with their entire staff. One, because that's what we do, but also this is part of our WASC mid-year review. So this data is part of that review.
Thank you.
So one thing that we did improve upon greatly this year was participation rates. And I really have to hand it to the site administration team. They really put a lot of time and energy into ensuring that students were assessing. They involved the parent groups. They really partnered and they partnered with the students. I know down at TAM, they met with leadership groups and some other people to really talk about how can we incentivize this? How can we get word out that this is important? So they were able to meet the 95% participation rate for the entire district.
Did you flip
Those
the
three
numbers
numbers
straight?
Yeah, I just noticed that for the first time.
They're
Yes, I
probably just
did.
flipped.
No,
Should be
no, we imported
221.
kids. That's how we made our numbers.
That should be a higher percentage.
Yeah, sorry, that's the other way.
You're
yeah.
checking our
So,
math.
Yeah, these were students, this is
Sort of
students
like
enrolled.
Vote early and often.
Although not for all of them. I probably, it looks like I made, it looks
Then
like
that's the
just
only
this
one.
one is a mistake. I think this was meant to be 2.0 or 2.11 maybe. I don't know the math, but I think this is right, that's right, that's right, and that's right. I think it's just that one that's off.
We believe you.
So digging down a little more deeply, this is just ELA. And while we made some gains, there was other places where we dropped off. I think it was mentioned, I think this is the drop-off that the Drake team is going to be looking at specifically. This is the more drilled down data of how they did in specific areas. And as I've said in the past, I don't know why when we get to the area reports, Smarter Balance starts to do it a little differently. You know, we don't have met standard, you know, now it's above standard, near standard, and below standard, which is a different, you know, and they do have an explanation, it's within a range, but I think for reporting purposes, it makes it a little cloudy.
Is there any, I would be, I'm very curious. Given those questions, I would like to see how students are having to respond. I'd like to see the test. These are very generic questions. So
Yeah.
to see, I'd like to see how the content of the test reflects on these questions. Listening. How well do students understand spoken information? How does the test require that of students? Do the students have to say something in response? I mean, how does...
No, it's, you guys took it.
Yeah, for middle school, I know the one we took was, we had headphones, so for parts of the test, you had to listen to someone telling you information, and then you had to answer questions. You had to write answers to questions about what you had heard.
Right.
Okay, so
Say
it
they
was...
give you like a passage, they'll give you like a passage of a story, and then they'll ask you to go, oh, what did they say? You know, and like what's Teresa's problem? You know.
Okay.
That's all I know about listening. I'd also like to see this broken up into the schools.
Yeah, it is. I don't have this data broken into the schools right now. This is all district data. But so, Barbara, to your point, this is a little more like of a what they mean. And I know that you're saying you want to see what the actual assessment tool itself is asking and how well that aligns with this.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see that, and I think board members might find that grounding, to be able to reconcile the language, how we talk about these things, and actually what students have to do to demonstrate it. I think that's an area
Yeah.
where we could get some
Are you
information.
suggesting that we take the test?
I'd like us to look at it, not
Yeah,
necessarily take it, but
there
I'd
is
like to see it.
the only way to look. I mean, I don't know if I could probably. There are sample questions
Yeah.
and stuff, and online that I could provide.
Yeah, thank you.
And you can log in as a guest and take some sample questions.
Are these all on the computer, or is this on the computer?
Yes.
This test.
So here's the breakdown of student scores by group, by ethnicity. Again, what you notice here is this is the lack of comparative data. So one thing to point out is, concerted efforts around our equity work, and we did make some gains with our African American students. and Hispanic Latino students over last year, but not over the year before. By socioeconomic status. So this was
It's good.
a really good sign for us.
Yep.
Because I think if you remember over the last couple of years, one of the things that was pointed out was that our low SES students were scoring lower than low SES students in the state as well as the county. So that's things moving in the right direction in that sense. Here is our gender data. So both males and females made advancements over last year. This year, we still see a slight disparity in the English language arts. And these are our special ed students. Again, slight improvement, but not quite where we were 2 years ago. For math, these are our overall scores. So this was a concerted effort at TAM to really focus on improving scores. I think and here's the math area breakout.
Tara?
Yeah.
This is intended to measure college readiness with respect to these, right? So can you go back to the prior slide, please?
Yes.
So to what extent do these track, in fact, the number of our students who are going on to college?
We have not yet tracked this to our college-going students. And what this indicates sort of their skill level. It doesn't necessarily say whether or not they've met the requirements to go on, you know. So, and I don't know if they even have data yet as to how well scores on the SBAC are correlating to college readiness because it's still so new. But I would anticipate in the next year or two, we will start to see some of that research come out. Right now, I have not correlated. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, a higher percentage of this in our district goes to college, goes to
Higher than
4-year.
60%?
Yeah.
And do you know what the figures are roughly for, you know, Marin County in California? I mean, especially for the state, I mean, that's a pretty significant disparity.
It is. I don't know, but I do think the last time I knew in the state, it was around 50%.
50%. Does that include 2-year colleges? Or is
No,
that
it's a 4-year.
4-year.
But I can try to find that.
And again, this is just public schools, so Marin County, is it
Right.
just public?
Yep, so again, here, right, if we drill down, looking here and here as areas to get a little more specific on what they're asking kids to be able to do here. Whoops, sorry. Right, so this is concepts and procedures here. These are the things that the student needs to know and be able to do to meet that standard at that level.
The word fluency attracts my attention again, makes me want to look at the exam because fluency still means language facility. So there's some crossovers in here that I'd like to tease out.
It's definitely been raised that this is a text-heavy exam. So level of literacy is relevant as far as ability to to understand the problem that's being asked.
And evidently to express it.
Mm-hmm. Right. They are asked to, again, I should let them speak, but they are asked to explain their reasoning in certain questions. Were you going to say something, B?
Just out of like taking this test, this is on the computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole like mathematics thing is all words. So like, one of my like, it's just really tough for the kids that didn't get that English language arts.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like almost impossible, you know?
Yeah.
I do know, though, just hopeful sign is when I had it in middle school, we, because there was a part of the test that is one word problem and it sort of builds on itself, and the word problem was talking about putting donuts in a box, so it's like putting round shapes into a square box. But we're required to have a conversation about what donuts look like and what the square box would look like, because there could be students who wouldn't necessarily know those things, and you would have to know this in order to answer and know how to begin to answer some of the math questions.
Thank you. Yeah, they do a mini lesson ahead of time that sets the context, and I mean it's still difficult. If you know, English language learners are provided a dictionary. Sorry. But then you know, and it's an untimed test, but that it's a lot of text to get through. And I think to B's point, for some people, you know, for them to figure out what it is that's being asked of them, and that is part of the fluency. Do they understand what they're being asked to do? Mm-hmm. And that's why I think for our teachers to understand the assessment, you know, and to make sure that students have the ability to practice these types of problems ahead of time. So I believe here the 0%, no, that was a different time. Never mind. So again, in the district, we rose over last year, but are still reaching to improve over 2 years ago. So again, low SES improved in math also. Our gender. So just about even in gender here. And math and special ed continues to be a challenge for us in our district to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And then I just threw this in as an indicator, you know, there are some levels of correlation between our GPAs and our scores on our SBAC. So some implications, as I said, there were some gains that were made overall. We improved over last year. African American students' scores improved in ELA and remained about the same in the math assessment. And our Latino students improved in both assessments, as well as our low SES students. So those are positive enforcement, you know, to keep focusing on the things that we're doing that are working. So areas of growth, as we know, the achievement gaps remain, and they remain predictable. Particularly our African American, Latino, and low SES students continue to score lower than their classmates. Yeah.
We are correlating, are we not, some of this performance level against our chronic absence scores, or
yeah, against
counts.
attendance. Mm-hmm. Yes. There are also, yes. So areas of growth, San Andreas continues to be an area of growth for us where we need to continue to look at how we support our students at San Andreas. Also remembering that San Andreas has an overrepresentation of the student groups that score the lowest in these tests.
How does San Andreas compare to other continuation schools throughout the state? Do you know?
As far as SBAC data?
Yeah.
I don't know. And right now I can't check. But yeah, yeah, we can look at that.
We should definitely look at that.
As I said, these data are fairly consistent over our last 2 years, so it's predictable. You know, and we have aligned our LCAP goal, our main LCAP goal, with this data as one of the data points that we use, you know, to improve the learning of all students while narrowing our achievement and opportunity gaps. So what's being done to make some of these changes? Mostly, we have some professional learning opportunities that are targeted and that align with our LCAP goal. As I said, in math, we've now had the Big Ideas author out twice to work specifically with our math department. The math department's own work around identifying clear learning outcomes and success criteria. As we said, the English team is working with the Bay Area Writers Project. They're also looking at making sure how well they're implementing Common Core standards with an equity lens. We've sent and held several culturally responsive teaching workshops across the district to improve our ability to create inclusive classroom cultures. Our instructional coaches are focusing on high-impact instructional strategies, and they are specifically coaching through an equity lens. And the district admin team continues to build our own capacity to lead with an equity lens.
Does the capital R in culturally responsive indicate a brand or?
It's not a brand. It's a
Big idea.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. It's a practice. So culturally responsive. It can be culturally responsive teaching. It can be culturally responsive practices, but it's usually capitalized. So.
Tara?
Yeah.
Do we have data from our feeder districts over the last 3 years as well, right? So can we compare 8th grade performance and how it's developing in our feeder districts with how our performance is on these assessments is developing?
We have been looking at that I don't have that data. I don't have their data from this past year, but in the past we have been looking at it, and particularly, you know, where the students, as I said, this year will be the first time we'll be able to look at specifically SBAC scores for the same set of students from 8th grade, but we have, you know, been looking at, generally speaking, we look at where they come in and how well they progress over the years that they're with us, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know to the extent that, you know, whatever the data is for, you know, how they're doing for feeder schools, is there a fluctuation with respect to how the students are doing here,
Right.
you know, by the time they get into 11th grade? You know, are we showing overall improvement or not? Right. And so maybe you're going to get to this, but I guess, you know, there's a lot of data that you don't have yet, right? You said that it's embargoed. So are we going to expect like further reports back to the board when more data becomes available?
I will bring back when I have all of that comparative data. And I said, you know, when we went from the CSTs to the SBAC, it's hard to compare those things. So when we're looking at our, you know, incoming students, SBAC scores, you know, like I said, we don't have that side by side yet. But we do look at, you know, how do they do on the CSTs? Are they progressing the way we would anticipate, or are they, you know, are their scores dropping off? So it's been a little bit of apples and oranges, but this year forward, we're hoping that it'll be a much more even comparison.
And in fairness to Tara, we were debating whether or not to put this on the agenda tonight because there's so much information that we don't have at our fingertips right now. But we thought it was such a big subject that we'd do this presentation now, take the edge off, and then when she comes back with more data, we will be able to dive right into it.
So I just wanted to share some information from the Public Policy Institute of California, which they gather a lot of data around K-12 education, college readiness, college persistence. So this was, I shared this statistic earlier, 2015, 77% of students entering community college required some level of remediation. Based on that data, only about 20% of those students will finish or earn an AA or transfer to a 4-year at all. This was an interesting piece of information. They anticipate that by 2030, California will be 2.4 million college-educated workers short. That the growing industries in California are going to require a college-level education. And that, you know, that the, and it's shifting, that the demand will outpace the supply by 2030. And then, you know, the middle part there, as we shared last year, some of that data, you know, that someone with a bachelor's degree will out-earn over their lifetime their peers with a high school diploma by $1.3 million is not insignificant. Particularly, you know, when you're living in a county where the average 2-bedroom apartment is between $3,200 and $3,600 a month in rent.
Is that last statistic, is that based on degrees awarded in California, or just people holding degrees
Just people
who reside in the state?
Just people holding degrees that reside in the state.
Work in the state.
And work in the state, yeah.
Well, you know, there is some cause for optimism because by 2030, we're likely to have a different federal administration that might have different immigration policy.
Fair point, Michael.
Yeah. There's open.
And I also want to reiterate for me and for lots of people that this is not just about economics, right? That it's about providing people, everyone, the appropriate skills to be, you know, to be productive citizens, to be critical analyzers, you know, to be able to challenge systems and structures and policies that may be biased or unjust or that they just don't like, to be able to be, you know, intelligent in your approach to having an opinion about something. And I really like the way Zaretta Hammond, she's an author who has written a book about culturally responsive pedagogy in the brain, talks about, you know, it's really about making independent learners, that these are all skills that are just, they allow you to learn on your own. And that's really what we're about, right? We're really about teaching kids how to learn. And if they can learn how to learn, then they can learn anything. So that's sort of at the crux, and I do believe that's at the spirit of the Common Core. You know, are we teaching kids to learn how to learn?
Thank you. Thank you. We've been asking you, pummeling you with questions all along. Does anyone else have any questions?
That means you're engaged.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, this is not an action item, just a report. You'll be coming back to us with more data.
I'll let you know as soon as I hear when they're going to release. They'll probably release it tomorrow.
Thank you. You were up there a long time. I appreciate that. All right. We are on to the district-wide energy efficiency proposal.
Good evening once again. Mary, if I may borrow your clicker.
That's a technical term.
Clicker, yes. We're learning how to learn here every evening. Stand before the board. Mary, if you'd pull up the slide deck, please. It's all right. So this evening, this is a discussion item. It's a very, very brief 30,000-foot level presentation, but it really builds off the August 22nd workshop we had with regard to the facilities master plan and the priorities. One of the questions that really resonated with me, I believe it came from our board president, was is there a way, as we look at the facilities master plan, and you know, there's a long list of needs and wants on that master plan, is there a way that we can attack some of our facilities challenges, growth challenges, in a manner other than the traditional external revenue raising via bond and parcel tax and such? So that question really resonated with me. Dave Yoshar and I had several conversations about that. Just as a reminder, the FMP outlined 4 priorities, and we discussed these at length at our August 22nd workshop. We need to house immediate growth. You know, we are growing as a district, that's no secret. We began that process with interim housing phase 1. We're now in the early stages of interim housing phase 2. We have we have 5 school sites and a corporation yard and a district office, and they are in various states of repair. Most school districts, and we're no exception, we have facilities that are nearly new, and we have historic buildings and everything in between. And the systems also mirror, that wide range of facilities that we have. So we are constantly looking to make sure that we're maintaining our facilities in proper fashion. There are always, safety is number one. Staying in compliance with various codes and regulations are obviously priority number one. And that takes, constant effort. And then program enhancements, and that really is a very, very wide net because that refers to our instructional programs and co-curricular programs and so forth. We are in the teaching and learning business. Our product is, a successful accumulation of 13 years of education for our students. So program enhancements certainly is and will always be, should be, our number one priority. So we've got a lot of needs in the district. They don't come cheap. What's another way that we can look at addressing some of our challenges? So with that, looking at development of an energy master plan, not to be confused with a facilities master plan, but an energy master plan, an EMP. And what we would do is talk to a firm, and there are many such firms out there. We would develop an RFP that would ask a firm to come in and take a look at our district and how we operate our district and develop a comprehensive energy master plan. And they would look at a variety of components to energy usage in our school district. Lighting is certainly one. Those top 3 slides were taken from Tam High. You can see that the lighting is not ideal. The 2 bottom slides are not from our own district, but they demonstrate differences in improved lighting upgrades. So we take a look at lighting at all of our school sites and how we can improve efficiency and hopefully improve the lighting itself. Thank you, Mary. So even though we live in a relatively temperate climate, our buildings do heat up. At my house, I rarely turn on the air conditioning, even though I live in the Napa Valley where it gets warm, because I have the opportunity to cool my house at night. I can open up windows, turn on a whole house fan, and evacuate that hot air. We're a school. We shut everything up tight, usually around 10 o'clock when our custodians go home, so we can't always evacuate that hot air. But could we put systems in place that would do that for us? It doesn't necessarily take away the need for air conditioning in certain sites and locations, but it certainly would go a long way to improving our classroom climate if we could pull that hot air out of these buildings every evening like most of us do in our houses. So looking at how we can purge hot air out of our buildings on a nightly basis. Too far? Here we go. We have a number of heating and cooling systems throughout our school district. So we would, we meaning the energy services company that we would contemplate engaging with, would evaluate all of our furnaces and our boilers and our AC units and so forth as to their condition and, again, overall efficiency. We also would like to continue down the road of renewable energy resources. We're very, very proud of the solar array that sits in the parking lot, roughly 100 yards from here. And we would like to expand those types of opportunities across the district. This one is interesting. All of you are probably aware because you all have, energy bills at home. PG&E now is charging different rates for energy uses depending on time of day. It's more expensive to draw power in the daytime than it is in the middle of the night. So one of the things that a number of institutions are doing, both public and private, is this notion of battery storage, that you actually purchase your energy after hours at night, and that flows into a battery storage center, and then you draw from those batteries during the course of the day when the power is more expensive. So it's a way of saving money. You still, you're not necessarily cutting back on the energy you're using, but you're just funneling into your system in a different manner. Again, purchasing in off-peak hours and then drawing from your battery pack, for lack of a better term, during the day when power is more expensive. We also, as we look at a comprehensive energy master plan, would love to see our students involved in that process, if nothing else, be enlightened as to new ways of energy conservation, establishing renewable sources and so forth. So we look to combine this with an education program for our students. Again, we are in the teaching and learning business, and what a great opportunity for our students. We've had conversation, both formal and informal, about our pool. We have beautiful pools on our campuses. That's the Drake High pool there. And the slide on the right is the infamous broken boiler that I sent you a video a long time ago when it was spouting water. Our boilers are a challenge. They're in constant states of disrepair. They are undersized. They apparently weren't installed properly. So our boilers are a problem, and it's something that we need to address, though that's an expensive proposition. But right now, as we speak, in order to keep the pools at the requisite temperature, I think it's 81 degrees. They wanted to run me out of town when I lowered it to 78. Per suggestion, we need to upgrade our heating systems in our pools. Building controls. Again, as we look at energy usage and conserving energy, automated systems likely help us do that. So we look at Wi-Fi based systems for AC only, integrating building automated systems throughout our campuses. And then simple things like door contacts and occupant sensors when you're talking about climate control in the building. I walk into this room sometimes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's dark and empty, and it's probably 55 degrees. So, looking at being more efficient with that. This is a rough look at our utility costs currently per square foot. San Andreas is a small campus. Most of those rooms have individual little air conditioning units and so forth and heaters, so they're a little more expensive. Temescal, again, small school, and you see economies of scale work in our favor with our larger sites. The Redwood High School District Office, Temescal School, Tamalpais Adult School, that's the Carlisle building. We do benefit from purchase of kilowatt hours via our solar array. So that drives down the cost. So we'd like to expand, as I say, those renewable energy sources. So a comprehensive energy program via an energy master plan. First and foremost, we'd like to improve the classroom environment for our students. We'd also like to spend less money doing it, so we're reducing utility expenditures. We're the TAM district. We're a premier school district in the state of California. Why shouldn't we be a leader in pursuing green initiatives across our school district? We should be at the forefront. We believe that there will be a cost savings to the district, and the beauty is we're not looking at any outflow from our general fund in doing so. And we do that by way of pursuing alternative funding sources. There is some remaining Prop 39 money, though that, in our case, is probably already accounted for. There are other additional state, federal grants and loans available. There are self-generation incentive programs of sorts out there, primarily, I believe, on the federal level. There are renewable energy bonds and other types of funding sources. We're not experts in that area, hence the need for an energy services company to chase that for us. Right now, I was told recently that there's $100 million remaining in one renewable federal grant. It's for renewable energy. It is, people are competing for it across the country. It's first come, first served. But I know that the San Benito School District just recently got $3 million to put in a solar array. That was just literally a couple of weeks ago from that money. So there apparently is money out there. Again, we don't pretend to be experts in that field, hence the need for hiring a company that can do that for us and bring that money in. This is a discussion item this evening. Happy to entertain questions. Not looking for any board action, though we would like to offer up an RFP and bring that back to you for approval at our next board meeting. We believe this, again, goes a long way in addressing some of the needs identified in the facilities master plan that we could attack from a different angle. That wouldn't affect, that wouldn't require going out for a bond in the immediate, and it wouldn't draw from our general fund. Questions? Barb?
would any of these funding sources be the source to pay for this particular study?
Study will be of no cost to the district.
How can
is
that be?
that?
My understanding is that they will recoup their fees for their time as they pursue this other money. That's where it will come from. There is absolutely $0 spent in retaining this company.
Is that typical of all companies that we would be soliciting?
There are multiple companies that provide these services in the hopes of securing funding that will allow them to, again, recoup the expenditures of their time and so forth in another manner other than drawing directly from the school district.
Is that effectively then is a criteria for looking at any one of these consultants?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, I would not bring to you any, at this point, we're not asking the board to allocate any money in this direction. We'd like permission to solicit these energy service companies, see what they have to offer, see what they can do for us, do the assessments. We would then prioritize as a district our needs with regard to, once we see the assessment, and I'm kind of flying blind here, but it says, hey, you have inefficient boilers that are heating your pools. That should be a priority for you. Or, we can put in another solar array, and that should be we would work with them to determine our energy priorities. All of our teachers, and rightfully so, are clamoring for air conditioning. And, it's hot in their classroom, particularly if you're in a second-story building or if your room faces a certain direction. I personally think that classroom climate is really important, and that should be a priority. It may not need to be addressed by an air conditioning unit. Maybe just by evacuation of hot air, we can do it a different way. So, again, we're not experts in that field. We'd like to work with experts in those areas, and if they're able to find funding for us to attack those projects, that eats into the FMP. That prevents us from spending money from a different source. And that's really what we heard loud and clear from the board, roughly a month ago at that workshop, is how can you do some of this work short of going out for a multi-million-dollar bond or, drawing from your general fund.
I know students at Drake are very interested in getting solar panels at our school, but we've had a lot of pushback because our roofs cannot support them. So do you know if people are looking into ways to be able to fix that problem or other places that we would put the solar panels on campus?
That's a really great question, and you're absolutely right. And it's not just Drake High School, but most of our roofs are not structurally, they're not designed and built to accommodate that kind of weight on the roof. So we'd be looking much like Redwood High has here, parking lot structures. There are possibilities for structures in other places too, but parking lots tend to make the most sense. But you're right, we would not be looking at placing solar panels on our roofs. The capital improvements necessary to hold that weight would just not be practical.
And I'm looking at your last slide on the next steps, the timing.
Yeah, we'd like to move quickly on this. If we're not looking for action tonight, but I'm prepared literally as early as Friday to have an RFP reviewed by our attorney to see if it meets our standards for RFPs. We then would put that out. We'd establish a relatively tight timeline for turnaround with regard to responses. We'd pick a company, you would approve them. We'd bring it to you for your approval. Once that was done, we would, they would commission a detailed energy assessment of our school district. They develop a program, and we'd bring that back to you for your approval, and then we'd go forward. If the money's there, that's the key thing. But we would want to move quickly in this area.
How do they get paid if we don't move forward with implementing anything? If they come back and with a lot of recommendations?
Yeah, they wouldn't. At least I can say they wouldn't receive any financing from us. And we would make sure that was hard and fast in any contract that we would sign.
And how did you come up with focusing on this first? I know I saw the first slide, and I do recall that those were the big areas
those
of
priorities. And I think it was Laura who said, "Is there a way you can do something?"
Well, yeah, no, I agree. So that's what I was wondering. How did you come up with doing an energy audit? Because that was what was free That's what I'm just trying to understand. What made you choose this versus some of the other areas?
I had been introduced to a group from Capital Advisors, Jack O'Connell, former assemblyman, and Kevin Gordon, who I knew from a past life years ago when he was a site principal many, many years ago. And they contacted Dr. Yoshihara, presented us an opportunity to look at this, and we ran with it. It was very fortuitous, I think, is maybe the best way to put it, that as we were engaged in all of our FMP work and discussions, including work with the board, that, David presented me with, this information, and we ran with it.
Yeah, just doing an energy audit, it takes a lot of hours, and so I'm just surprised that they would move forward. Like if, for instance, they identified new boilers or identified new roof to put a solar panel, we say, well, we don't really have the funding to do that. I guess I'm just trying to think of what their deliverable is that we're technically may not be paying for. Because they'd have to have something written up for us, and it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Seems too good to be true, to be honest. But I look forward to it. I hope it is true. I mean, I hope it just.
I'm hopeful I can bring back
Yeah.
something much more concrete than this little presentation tonight.
Yeah, no, this is helpful.
Yeah. But we want to keep you abreast of what we're thinking.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is great.
Are there any other questions? Are you guys interested in having an RFP sent out on Friday?
What is the RFP going to ask for?
RFP will, and again, Friday I would send it to our attorney. I don't have time until Friday to address this at all, but I would send an RFP to our attorney, and essentially that RFP would ask for an energy services company. We'd solicit an energy service company to come in and conduct an energy audit, per Leslie's words, and then from that audit, assist us in reading it and really examine that audit and determining our priorities for energy savings projects. And then from there, it'd be up to them to find the funding sources for us to do that.
So what you're looking for tonight is for us to say, go ahead and send an RFP to the attorneys to look at, and then you'd bring it back as an action item?
No formal action tonight, but just, I'm sensing nods of, you may as well give it a try. As long as there are no objections, that we will proceed in that manner. But we wouldn't engage in any, certainly, contract with anybody without bringing it to you first for your approval. But this gives us the opportunity to begin the early stages of it.
Yeah, so Laura, I just want to make sure I'm hearing two different things, right? The question is, are you going to come back to us one more time before the RFP goes out? Or are you going to issue the RFP based on the discussion that we've had tonight and the feedback that you get from the attorney, and then come to us with proposals that you've received in response to the RFP and a recommendation as to a firm that we might retain for the purpose of doing the audit?
I'll defer to the superintendent. I'll have a conversation with Dr. Yoshihara about that. My preference would be to release the RFP and bring back to you the proposals.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, what's the risk, right? I mean, really the downside is your time.
That's the only thing is
on this,
time.
right? Your time and your energy, if you will. But
I'm
the rest
excited
of
about it. I'm excited about it. So my personal preference, but I'll defer to the superintendent, would be to work with my attorney, our attorney, release the RFP, then come back to you with information and proposal.
Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I think that's consistent with the desire. The solicitations of a request for proposal of the firms will center around their ability to analyze largely our energy consumption. That in itself is not new. This came out since, you remember, Prop 39 a number of years ago, where firms are adept at looking at our demand usage and pricing structure to see if savings can be had there. And it's not overly complicated for someone who's skilled to walk into a building and know from our lighting to our heating to our windows and so forth, much like in a home, what the technology is out there. So I think in terms of Leslie's question, where is the money for them. The money for them comes from some percentage of the grants or the dollars to be had when you implement these through rebates a lot of times. So much like a financial firm will make money on what we call the float, which is sort of your interest, they're making money sort of off the back end. So don't get me wrong, they're not doing it for free. And
No, I understood that. My
Yeah.
question was, what if we decide not to do anything? That was my question. I can't imagine that, but what if we say,
yeah,
we're not going to do anything right now, and is there a time limit? And that's all.
Yeah,
It was really that.
so that'll be important when the contract comes forward from them in terms of when we bind with them. What is our obligation for service for that? But things like on-bill financing, which you had up there, are interesting models which don't really require any kind of grant or whatnot, and it's an interesting way to move forward with energy plans. We'll see how they present things like that. In real simple terms, on-bill financing will take a newer technology, say lights, and so as a consumer, we budget a certain amount for utilities. The idea is if you put in something that costs less and you're used to paying a higher amount, they take that difference and they finance it back to you. And they can run all the models about how many years it takes to pay that back. So you sort of buy that on your own dime, so to speak. They help you with the structure to do this on-bill financing. But what they say is you're not paying anything more because you now have more energy. So you're paying this off over some period of time. And OBF has been around for a number of years as well.
My understanding is typically, I'll defer again to David. My understanding that's typically about a 10-year arrangement, that payback.
Do we need a motion then?
It's not on.
No, it's more consensus in terms of your questions and sort of.
I mean, I would not do this if I got the sense from the board that, boy, this is a bad idea and please sit down. I'm not getting that sense at all. So I'll be doing some work in the next couple of weeks and coming back to see you.
So hopefully on the October 10th agenda, we might have, I don't know when what the turnaround time is.
I don't know if I can get turned around that fast, but certainly in
October.
October. More than likely the second meeting in October.
Okay. All right, it's not an action item, so
Not an
I
action
think
item.
you're getting nods from.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
that we
appreciate
like
you
this,
listening.
pursue this. All right, next up is, thank you, Lars. Thank
You're
you for that. Class size ratios.
Class size ratios, completely switching gears and switching hats. We have a practice of bringing both in the fall and spring semesters a brief report to you with regard to class size ratios in our 3 comprehensive high schools. And we have that tonight. There's a memorandum a brief memorandum there, if you could pull that up, please, the first attachment. The memo.
Don't worry about
And you'll see that these are the contractual ratios. In other words, in our agreement with our Teachers Association, we agree that these ratios will be adhered to in these individual departments. Obviously, as an example, physical education, class sizes are larger in PE than they are, say, in English, where there's obviously some significant grading of written material. I am happy to report that we do meet these contractual ratios with one very, very minor exception. At Drake High School in their English department, they've staffed actually at 1/3, as of when I wrote this thing, even though it says today's date, I wrote this, I don't know, got the information from Tara about a week and a half ago. They were a 0.5 over that 130 ratio. That's literally half a kid. The union hasn't pushed back on that, and I don't know what it is today. It could be less than that, but we do meet the contractual requirement of class size ratios. What's important, though, and Mary, if you could pull up that second piece, please, is not only do we meet the contractual obligation that we have with regard to those ratios, one of the things we've talked about quite a bit, and I apologize for that being so small. Mary does that to challenge me.
We got them in
Is
a-
that, yeah, you should have copies.
Sorry.
We have endeavored to work with our school sites, and Taratopia, by the way, is a big piece of this, even though I'm standing up here. We've endeavored with our school sites to have them staff closer to the ratios. And what that translates to is that as you get closer to those class size ratios, theoretically you need less teachers, which is less expense to the district. So you balance, a proper educational environment with cost effectiveness, not being overstaffed. And I'm pleased to report, because what I did today, and I know Tara's done it too, we did it independent of each other, I looked at the fall 17 class size ratios here, and very quickly, so for instance, green is Drake High. If you look at let's just take English, because we mentioned them a minute ago. They have a class size ratio at Drake High School English Department of 135. Now it says 0.3 up there, not 0.5, so we're getting better. And the contractual ratio is 150. In fine arts, they're staffed at 130.5, yet they have a ceiling of 150. So again, there's some wiggle room in there. But last year, they were at 117 rather than 130. So I went through each department, each school, and I'm pleased to report that at Drake High, only the science department is slightly smaller than they were last year. They're at 130.3 today. Last spring they were at 131, so that's very close. At Redwood High School, they are larger across the board in all of their class size ratios. They staff closer to it. At Tam High, only in 2 cases, one in fine arts, where they today are at 126.8. Last spring they were at 127, so it's literally, a third of a kid. And in science, today they are at 129.6. Last year they were at 132. So again, very minimal. Those are the only 3 examples of being less than they were last year. So the goal of staffing closer to the ratios, that's happening. That's happening. Can we get closer? Yes. However, those are tremendous gains. And I believe in your board packet, or your electronic anyway, you have this matrix where you can go back and look at the years. Just click on those different tabs in those spreadsheets and you can see for yourself. But I, again, went through it by hand today, and we're doing what we believe we're all working together to do. And that is staff close to those ratios. So we feel good about that. And the 3 that are not, it's a whisper as to how close they are. I mean, it's a whisper as to how close they are. So that's where we are with class size ratios.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for working on tightening that up. I really appreciate that.
School sites, meaning the principals and the APs, the counselors, Taratopia, they deserve the lion's share of the credit for all of this. They do.
Any questions on staffing ratios? Is there any public comment on this? Okay, thank you,
Thank
Lars. And before we get into the next agenda items, I just realized that we haven't had action items tonight, and usually I ask for public comment regardless if it's an action item or not, and I don't know why I didn't, but I see a couple people in the audience tonight. If there's something that you wanted to speak to the board about, items on the agenda, I am very sorry I forgot to ask for public comment. Some of you came in later, but if you are here to speak to us for an item that's on the agenda, items A, B, C, D, and E, if you're here to speak to us, I'm happy to yield the floor to you for 3 minutes. No? Okay. Just wanted to make sure we weren't in trouble. Great. Okay. Thank you. We are on to item G, which is Board Bylaws 9220 Governing Board Elections. If we have a tie, what do we do?
Thank you, members of the board, student trustees. We have a couple board policies here tonight. As we said, this is one of the important roles of the board to approve policies. Most of them are less to do than others, although they're all important. This one here in particular is of some interest for the board. 9220, I did mention this to the board ahead of time, the elected members anyway. as there's a section here, this has to do with elections. This one is coming up for review. There's a section that was highlighted, basically as President Anderson said, what to do in the case of a tie. And while unlikely, it can certainly occur if we were to engage in a tie. And what the policy suggests basically is it's better to have something in place than nothing in place, because then you're dealing with all kinds of lawyers and so forth. I would venture, if you actually were to have a tie, about how to go about that. So if it's in policy, you can resort to your board policy. There are basically three options, as it states here. One of them is to essentially draw lots, straws, sticks, whatever it is, but literally draw lots to determine the winner. As it says, winner by lot. The other option is to do a runoff. And then the third looks like a combination thereof. And so this really is up to the board. This is your future elections. I don't really have much of a stake. I do know President Anderson has some good questions around what our neighbors are doing and cost. Special elections will have a cost. I'm still waiting. I've reached out to our registrar who's helped us in the past with regards to that for an estimate. Broadly, we budget about $180,000 for election year cycles. Basically what happens is the registrar will take all elections that happen and divide the cost by the participants. So the more items on a ballot, or the more municipalities and school districts have elections, the lower the cost because you're sharing it. If you're the only one, which could be the case, you bear the full cost of that election. And ours will be fairly expensive because we have a large voting area. You all know this going through the process. So I'm just giving you some frame. It's $180,000 is what we budget for our elections. We will do that for the upcoming one in 2018. Special elections could be more if nobody else is running a special election. That's something you have to weigh. And by lot. So what do our neighbors do? I pulled up a sample. I don't remember offhand. President Anderson may. It was roughly 50-50 what the districts are doing. And I just looked up their policies.
So David, sorry to interrupt, but we have this new law now, which is, I think, in the election code, right, which requires that we have elections in even-numbered years.
Yes.
Right, in order to promote sort of democracy, right? The idea is to have greater participation in the elections.
Yes.
So, but now we have this, now you're giving us a choice. I understand it's not your choice, it's the education code or whoever it is that offers, potentially a runoff election, which if we hold an election in, let's say, well, we are, right? There's going to be an election in November 2018.
Right.
And there's a tie. So are we even allowed in light of, in light of that code section? Well, I guess the section itself isn't even valid until 2020. But I mean, assuming that we're subject to those even year requirements, are we even allowed to have a runoff election where there's guaranteed to be lower turnout than in a general election?
I would assume yes, because if you think about runoffs and other sort of political venues, those do exist as well, even under. And this new law is applicable to all local governments. We could certainly research that, but this comes to us through your association, your school board, and vetted by their attorneys. So I would have to assume that there must be a provision allowing for a runoff situation should that occur. And probably you would want that as a board relatively soon, so you can fill that position rather than have it, vacant. So, I know President Anderson was going to add something.
Oh, you gave me the information. Santa Fe School District, Reed, and Ross Valley School District have, their language is, if there's a tie, they draw straws. And Novato, Mill Valley, and Ross have a runoff election. You're going to say something funny.
Rock, paper, scissors, that's what my preference.
Yeah, I'm all for option one.
Okay.
I just, $180,000, just, I think people should get out to vote the first time and know that their vote matters. And I don't think in a district our size that it's likely that we would have a tie, but what do you guys think? Option 1, 2, or 3?
Well, considering the amount of time and funding it takes for somebody to run, the thought of them, I mean, no, I'm talking about the person themselves.
know, I
I mean,
know. I hear what you're saying.
It takes a lot more than you realize. It can. Not you, but just
No,
the general public, and the thought of I think, yeah, she agrees, because she was out there walking with me. But the thought of then going in and drawing straws would be really hard to stomach. So I'm trying to think in terms of the candidate too, so
Yeah.
I'm a little torn.
But, you know, the financial burden on the candidates.
Well, that's what I was just saying,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know,
And
it's
then now to
just-
go, oh, here, pick a straw. It's a little in time, and
But to
I'm a
do
little
a second
torn.
election, you know, just,
Yeah, well, then, I mean, that's
horrible.
worse, yeah. I guess I don't like any of the options.
I don't like option 3, having to revisit it all the time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with the districts that do have it as special election, when those actually occur, if they occur, I suppose, how they would go about that, because it is certainly a low risk, low incident.
Yes, unlikely, you're right.
Unlikely.
So I heard draw lot from
Rochambeau.
Michael.
No, you heard Rochambeau.
Rochambeau.
Rochambeau. Barbara,
I have to do the Rochambeau too. As absurd as it is after you do an election.
I know, it's,
However, another chunk of change
Yeah,
for
another
something that's.
Another 80,000, 180,000 is crazy.
180,000.
180,000 when we're trying
That's
to,
not responsible
Yeah.
for us at this point in time.
Yeah.
so
It's
Leslie,
just- Oh, no, I agree with you. I'm just
Okay.
saying, it just makes,
I know, after all that, to draw straws, but
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what the students
As
think.
they're democratic minds.
I think if you're legitimately considering Rochambeau, you would have to clarify the rules that you would be playing by, if it would be 2 out of 3, or if you do, because some people, there's actually like a few different rules, so something
It's
to
on three,
consider.
okay?
Famous for this one, yeah.
You haven't sat in on enough meetings with us to know we're always serious, but we're never serious.
Yes, I know. I was.
maybe not Rochambeau.
Joining right in with you there.
And, I mean, what if one of the candidates is a grandmaster Rochambeau player?
Yeah, arm wrestling.
I'll have to cede my election to you then, Grandmaster Ford.
This actually happened for Csea, President
Oh, yeah.
Did.
right?
Not with Chris, or not with Tim, but Chris Knudsen before him, and Laura on how they resolved it.
There was a tie.
Yeah,
We're gonna pull name out of a hat.
yeah, that's what we're talking. Well, so I'm hearing option 1.
We will bring it back with that option in there.
And honestly, I didn't really dissect the rest of it, but that's the one that got my attention.
And you have the red line version, and
Yeah.
it will come back for a second read. As always, the board is welcome to ask questions or provide input.
It's shocking, the qualifications for being a board member. I mean, the bar is, no offense to any of us up here, but it's pretty darn low. It is. Okay, no public comment after that, but I should ask for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, moving on.
We have a couple more or not?
Moving on.
So there's, the rest are not so 9230 has to do with orientation for board candidates. You have that there. I'm happy to engage in questions, but otherwise I'll bring back for second read. You have that verbiage up there.
Yeah, I didn't have any comments on it.
Comments, questions? Public comment? Okay, aye.
All right. 9400 is interesting and timely. This one has to do with board self-evaluation, among other stuff, which you guys have just did annually. So this is consistent with practice, same thing. Most of this is just change in wording. I didn't see anything significant. I do try to point that out for the board if there is, but same thing, I'll bring it back. No questions? All right.
Questions? Public comment? Okay, now we're on item J. That one was,
Yeah, that was just elimination. J was just elimination. This was an old policy. I checked with Dr. Topier with regards to this. We don't, it's just two sentences there. Regarding, I'm going through all the policies now, and it's regarding district contests. And to my knowledge, we don't utilize this. This comes from 1992, 25 years ago. So maybe at one time we had district contests. Under CSBA, there is no BP 1323 that exists either. And so the proposal is to eliminate.
Okay,
something
that
we don't
one's,
use.
comment, questions, public comment? Okay, then we pulled one item off of consent, item 18F, which Chuck pulled off.
Yeah, I voted, in the warrants for the money to run this thing, but I'm not prepared to approve this. Vote yes on approval until I know how many students are going and how many chaperones are going, what's the chaperone to student ratio. Doing the arithmetic, dividing the $700 and something into the $80-something thousand that we approved, it comes to 120 students. But I'd still like to know what the chaperone ratio is. And it's not until April, so I'd like to see it come back with the numbers filled in.
So chaperone, did you have some other ones too?
How many students?
Number of students participating and number of chaperones.
It's, Chuck, in the, not in the report, but on the agenda item, it says an estimated 250 students and 25 chaperones.
Oh, it did? I didn't see that.
It should be on the,
Right.
why isn't it on the application,
1 to 10.
on the request form?
Is that 1 to 10?
Yeah,
Do we- I
if you
have-
look on the agenda itself.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, but shouldn't it be on the form?
Wait, where are you seeing that, Michael?
It's under recommended.
It's on the
Oh,
agenda.
it's on the blurb.
Right.
For the recommended motion.
Oh, yeah.
50 and 25. There you go. It's 1 to 10. It's not the other one.
Want to know for planning purposes if they can go ahead and
Where does it say? I don't see that.
Here.
Approve.
But it's not until.
Oh, there we go. I
April,
see.
so.
I had to take it all the way out.
I have a general question, and you don't need to answer now, just maybe something to come back to. Two things, and part of this is personal experience with a family member that was traveling a few months ago that got very sick in a foreign country. And the travel policy that was very cheap, that wasn't their medical insurance, enabled the company to have a translator. They called the hospital. They had a medical team. They were going to airlift the family member out if they determined they weren't getting the right care. Complete communication. And it occurred to me, and again, don't answer me now because I'm just curious, with all our field trips and our trips overseas, do we have some sort of agreement? And the reason why I asked is when I looked into it later for my travel, there was certain companies that only dealt with schools, and it would be a way if there's an earthquake, whatever it is, that the families would be notified, and we wouldn't be relying on us at the board level saying, gee, 25, that sounds pretty good, 25 versus 250, that kind of thing. And it'd be nice to have it standardized. And I bring up, then the other issue, I actually talked to Laura about this with all of our overseas trips. And I'm a complete proponent, supporter, advocate. I think it's a great program. Both my kids have done it. But I just want to share with you that there was a field trip where in Spain, and I felt my son was safe. I talked to the family ahead of time, but there were a couple things where we heard that the kids were out until 5 in the morning and walking home but they were apparently safe. It was kind of part of the cultural. And I got concerned, sure, legally maybe the district's fine, but in terms of some standard protocols of how we inform our parents of what sort of level of supervision or what it was very clear before the students went, for instance, there would be no alcohol, that, this absolutely, there were some real bright line criteria, but it made me start to consider, well, what other things are parents assuming that maybe is not happening? So again, I'm not asking for an answer now, but all this discussion made me think of it, that I'm sure you do have some kind of protocols and policies in place, but probably the highest priority would be to see what sort of, how do you decide how many chaperones you need, and how do you decide, or how do you prepare the parents ahead of time? What are you going to do in case XYZ happens? That kind of thing would be nice to know. The same way, hearing how well the bomb threat went, I'm sure you had a protocol ahead of time of how you responded, and with so many great programs we have with students going overseas and going on these great trips, it'd be nice to just know at some point. Again, I'm not asking for you right away, but I'd love to hear how we handle that. So thank you.
Well, I'm still not, with respect to the Drake trip, I did the arithmetic, and the total cost of the trip is $180,000. If indeed there are 250 students at $720 per student. I'd just like a little more detail before saying yes to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hugely expensive undertaking.
I support that. Yeah, I agree with you, Chuck.
We'll work with you then.
Okay.
Yeah, and since we brought it up here, it'd be great just to bring back to the full board, because I'd like to hear too. Yeah, thank you.
And will you fill in the form with or have whoever's in charge, so it's more complete? Yeah. Okay, so we're not taking action on that item tonight. All right, I think we are adjourned.
And
Thank
it's
you.
9:01. I just want to point that out. Very good, Laura.
Yeah.